Hello friends, welcome back. I am Rajneesh and today we are going to explain how this identity policy and accounting works. In the last few sessions in open source data center, we have understood how a 389 directory server works, how we authenticate a client against Kerberos, how we configure a Kerberos on this infra server. So finally, what we have done till now, we have configured DNS server, we have configured Kerberos key distribution center, KAdmin server, we have configured DHCP on it, we have configured 389 directory server on it. So and finally we set up SSL negotiation, or we configured 389 directory server so that it supports SSL. So Red Hat has designed or created a beautiful package which is identity policy and accounting, which is combination of all those things. So previously in the data center, while configuring the infra server and configuring the client, we had to do some modifications, and actually there were a lot of modifications from the infra end. So IPA is a combination of all these packages. You can exclude DHCP out of it. So IPA includes your DNS server, it has inbuilt DNS server, it has inbuilt NTP server, Kerberos, it has 389 directory server, and a certificate server inside it. So it's all in one package, and which works uh, as an active directory server for Linux. This is the same. You are managing the password policies, you are managing the sudoers, you are managing everything centrally from one location, which will be your IPA server. So it manages the identity of machines, identity of services, and identity of servers. It manages the policies related to your services and makes a log of accounting. So first point, it serves as a domain controller for Linux. In the same way, Active Directory works as a domain controller for Windows. So in the same way, here we have a ream which is going to be uh, IPA lab start local or something like that. The thing I want it to be different so that all the labs will be existent at the same time. So first thing, it acts as a domain controller for Linux environment, whether it's Red Hat, CentOS, OpenSUSE, or it's Ubuntu, or any Linux or Unix or Mac flavor. The reason is it makes use of regular PAM modules to authenticate against it. So it can work on almost all versions of Linux. It creates identity stores. It stores the details of the users. Centralized authentication, as we did in LDAP also. We can manage all the users from one central location, which is IPA server. Domain control for Kerberos and DNS services. Authorization policies. We can specify which user is authorized to do what. Which user is authorized to do sudo on which server, or these kind of policies. Okay, so the other is NTP and certificate server. So it can also work as an NTP server and a certificate server. Why a certificate server? Because if we are talking about SSL negotiation between the environment, or SSL implementation, or if we are talking about the replication between these environments and services, so we'll be using certificate for that. Why do we need NTP? If we are talking about any Kerberized or Kerberos related services, we need to make sure that the time is in sync between all the servers which are a part of a ream, because if we are talking about Kerberos ticket or Kerberos tickets, and the complete ream environment works on NTP in case the time lag is more than 5 minutes. So even in case you provide all the complete details, complete username and password, you may not be able to authenticate against the server. So NTP is very critical part for IPA or any Kerberos environment. So the components of 318 of IPA: dog tag certificate system, which is responsible for creating the certificates corresponding to the systems and the servers. 389 directory server that works as an LDAP server that we have already worked on. Kerberos KDC with LDAP backend. Kerberos, we already had a lab for it. Apache for web services. So it is also going to configure Apache so that you can manage you can manage IPA through it. IPAK password for password management, and actually this is command line utility, you won't be requiring it. DNS system and NTP system. So finally it's going to be all-in-one infra server for your environment, and this will be a good suggestion that you don't install anything else on this IPA server. If we are talking about our labs, we'll have a new server which will only have the base packages as of now. So here is the diagrammatic view which I copied from Red Hat. So this is actually your IPA server. This is the certificate system which has the internal directory server, which makes use of and which is responsible for providing and managing the certificates. And TP, all the machines in the IPA environment need to have the same time lag should not be much, so all the machines will keep their time sync with this IPA server. This is directory server, 389 directory server that we have already worked on and we had a lab for it. Kerberos KDC, I think you might already be knowing. We'll be creating a ream for it. Lab has already been created for it. So this is the DNS server that we already have worked on. So these are all the packages or the parts of IPA server. Okay, so coming on to the lab. Okay, okay, so till now what I have done is I have two machines with the base packages installed on them. One is IPA, which I am going to make as an IPA server. Other is IPA client, on which I'll configure this machine as an IPA client. So let's open putty session for it. Okay, let me increase the font size so that it'll be visible clearly. Change settings and window appearance, let's increase it to 16. New session, IPA client dot labs dot local. It's actually IPA client 1. In the meantime, let me try to log in into it. Ping IPA client 1. Okay, fine. So, fine. Here is the IPA server and here is the IPA client. Till now, these are the base machines. The DNS server is a different server, which is infra.labs.local. You can see it in etc resolve.conf. So these are the base machines using the DNS server, the already available DNS server. But after this IPA server has been installed, we'll be using this IPA server as our DNS server, and forwarding will all be done from this forwarding will be done to this 205. Fine. uh, can I resolve yahoo.com from it? Yes. So I have already set it up, so let me clear it up. And first thing we need to do is IPA or yum install IPA server. So now it's going to install all the packages that it requires. It has the dependency on NTP, on Apache, on certmongo certificate server, and Kerberos. So let it install the packages. It will take a few minutes to get them installed. So let's wait until it completes. So okay, totally there are 203 packages. And if we are talking about this client, okay, IPA client package, we need to install it. So let's install this package IPA client on the client. It is going to install the dependencies required. And one thing we need to make sure on the server is it should make use of static IP address. And it should not use network manager. IPv6 in it, we actually don't want it. Boot proto, we want it to be none or static, because we don't want to use DHCP on this IPA server. Network managed control, no. On boot, yes. IPADDR equal to, what's the IP for it? 204. So what we did is we disabled network management control for it, and we just statically assigned it the IP address. Update etc hosts for it, IPA dot labs.local and IPA etc sysconfig network IPA.labs.local. Fine. Okay. So network manager is not installed. That is good. After this is done, we'll just restart networking. Okay. The installation is just completed. IP tables minus L minus N. IP tables is working. S is status. SLNX is working and enforcing both. Fine. So till now we have installed the packages. The second part is to set up the IPA server. Think about the previous scenario when we have implemented LDAP server, we have implemented Kerberos, all were different parts and we had to struggle a lot configuring them. If we are talking about IPA server, IPA server install is the command that it has provided. Minus minus help will provide us the options. So our objective is to install the IPA server and also install the DNS server on the same. Okay. One thing, before we install it, let's make sure that the ports that are required by the IPA are opened. Or we can do it later on also. IP tables minus N IPA, creating a new chain for it. Minus L minus N minus minus line numbers. So before rejecting in line number 5, let's add a rule which says check out all the rules in IPA chain. So IP tables minus I input rule number 5, go to IPA. Okay, IP tables. Okay, DNS, Kerberos, they all should be allowed for it. We just had a look into the previous lab. It was 88 port that Kerberos uses. So IP tables minus I IPA minus S 192.168.1.0/24 for our LAN minus P TCP minus minus D port 88 minus J accept. Allow it for UDP also. Okay, now we'll be configuring DNS server on it, so allow DNS requests to it. We'll be configuring NTP server on it, so allow NTP server requests on it. Let me make sure that the port is 123 etc services. Yes, it's the same. Okay, the other two important ports are 389 and 636 for directory server. 389 636. So we are done with 389 directory server. If we are talking about Apache, we'll be required to open two ports, 80 and 443. Fine. Okay. So here is the set of rules that I have allowed. Let me save them. I implemented these rules before I installed IPA server. The reason is after I have installed the IPA server, it will configure itself to work as a client for it. So I don't want any kind of request which fails so that I may have to reinstall it. So I think sufficient services have been allowed. Let me run IPA server install now. With the DNS server on it. Okay, if we are talking about DNS server, let's provide it bind so it says we are still missing one package which is corresponding to dynamic DB update on LDAP for bind. Okay, one thing I would let you know is we have not installed bind chroot, or we are not installing bind in a chrooted environment because it has some more dependencies on SSL and dynamic DB. So we, in case you are planning to deploy it in a bind chrooted environment, we'll have to copy those libraries in var named chroot and then libraries. So just to prevent that, right now in this lab we are not using bind chroot. One more thing, let's make sure that it has an entry in etc hosts. Yes, it has an entry. Configure a standalone CA, which is dog tag certificate system, NTPD, instance of directory server, 389 directory server, KDC, Apache, and bind. Existing bind configuration detected. Do you want to overwrite it? Yes. Server name is fine. Confirm the domain. Labs.local. Kerberos protocol requires a ream to be defined. So ream, as I specified in the earlier documentation, it's in capital letter with the same name. The default is fine for us. Directory manager's password. I keep it manager at 123. Manager at 123. IPA admin. This is the administrative password for the user named admin. Whenever you are required to register a machine or required to log in into the IPA management console, it will be used. So I keep it admin at 123. Admin at 123. Do you want to configure DNS forwarders? Yes. Enter IP address for DNS forwarder 192.168.1.205. This is the other DNS server that's already implemented in our environment. 192.168.1.205. That is fine. No other forwarders. You can add more if you want. Do you want to configure reverse zones? Of course, yes. Please specify the reverse zone name. The format is, as we have already had at DNS lab, and I specified the format will be this one, 192.168.1 in reverse order, then inaddr.arp. That is fine. So before setting it up, it confirms all the thing. IPA master server will be created. The host name is ipa.labs.local, fine. IP address 1.204, fine. The domain is fine. Labs.local is fine. Bind DNS server will be configured to serve IPA domain with forwarders and reverse zone. All looks fine. Do you want to configure the system with these values? Yes. And now it has started setting up the directory server. It is going to take a couple of minutes. In the meantime, you can have your coffee. So, any other thing that needs to be done at the client end? No. It's going to take a couple of minutes. If you want to have a look into the logs, var log tail -f IPA server install log or PKICA install logs, it should be tail -f, sorry. Even if you don't have a look into the logs, it provides you the details of what actually is happening. First thing it does is create a directory server user. Restarting directory server means 389 directory server here. Creating certificate server user, PKICA instance, disabling nonces. So I think one more minute. Configuring SSL for directory server. Initializing Kerberos container. If you want, you can configure DHCP on the same server, or you can assign a static IP address to your client. Configuring SC Linux. So it's now applying the updates to the directory server or 389 directory server. maybe a last few seconds to get it completed. So adding the DNS container, setting up zone, reverse zone. The reason why I created those documentations before implementing the IPA was you can have a clear picture of what exactly is happening in the backend. If you are installing IPA server for the first time, you won't understand how actually it works. So here all is set up and all looks fine. Let's make sure whether the desired ports are open. So here if I have a look into the ports 80, TCP 80, TCP 443 is open, 389, TCP 636, TCP is open, 88 464 is also required on TCP and UDP. IP tables minus I, IPA minus P, TCP minus minus D port 464 minus S 192.168.1.0/24 minus J accept and accept it for UDP also. Okay, it's opened. For bind TCP UDP 53 is already open. If you are using some kind of replication, you can even use or open TCP port 53 also. And NTP 123 is already open. So let's save the firewall rules. Okay, so our IPA server is now ready to work. Make sure that you save these details in case you need them in future. Be sure to backup CA certificates stored in this. The password is the same as directory manager. Directory manager is the same as CN equal to directory manager that we used in 389 directory server. So our IPA server is ready. Minus minus list grep IPA. So IPA is on and IPA is on. IPA memcached. If you want, it can be switched on. So one thing before I reboot this machine, or let's reboot this machine, because IPA server has completely been set up and IP tables have been saved. Let's reboot to make sure that the IPA server is up after the server has been rebooted. Open console for it and have a look into what is happening at the back end. So if you see to the console, Labs.local was the ream that was created. Let it boot from the hard disk. Let's restart it. Still SSH service is not up. It failed for kdump, which is fine for me. Okay, coming out of it, restart session. We can see that directory service is running, KDC service is running, kpassword service is running, which allow you to change the password, and DNS service is running. memcached is running, HTTP service is running, and CA service is running, means all is fine. Now let's configure this IPA client so that it authenticates against this IPA server. IPA client install. You have two options. Either you can just do it through authconfig TUI, where it has the option for IPA v2, or the second is let IPA client install take care of it. So it does a discovery, DNS discovery failed to determine your domain. Okay, so the first thing that should be done, and that is good to be done, is etc resolve.conf and modify it. So I make use of this DNS server, which is 204. Now you can see that DNS discovery was not failed. The reason being, etc named.conf. Okay, the details are all saved in the Kerberos. So I'll have a look into it and I'll show you. Here's the Chrome. https ipa.labs.local. Proceed anyway. So here is the credential that it is asking me. Username was admin, password was admin at 123 that I provided when I installed IPA server. Authentication required. Okay. So coming on to form based authentication. The DNS discovery was successful because it already has configured the DNS for the environment, and it has the necessary forward and reverse lookups that are required. So here we can see the service records underscore Kerberos, or here we can see mm, cat etc resolve.conf. Okay, the name server that it is using is 205. Instead it should be 204. 204. Let's use 204 instead. And nslookup minus type equal to txt underscore Kerberos dot labs dot local. So here you can see that it is able to resolve this txt record. The same happens for these Kerberos master TCP and other service records. That helps a lot in discovering this IPA or this Kerberos server. So here is the ream labs.local, DNS domain is labs.local, IPA server that it has detected is, and base DND is equal to labs.local. Continue. Yes. User authorized to enroll computers. Right now there is only one user. We can use the same admin at 123. And here it says enrolled in IPA ream labs.local. Configure the Kerberos configuration file at the client end for it, and SSSD is configured for that. Hostname is not found in DNS. That is fine, no issues, it can be created. DNS server record set to IPA client 1. So let me see if the resolution is fine. Forward lookup is now fine. 192.168.1.190. The reverse lookup is not yet fine. If you want, that can be added to it. Coming back to it, clicking on DNS, here I can see that IPA client is a record, A record and SSH FP. These are the records that are added corresponding to this client. So it seems that all is fine till now. One thing that we need to do is okay, it has three parts: identity that manages the identities of users, creates groups, hosts can be added over here, or the hosts that have been added will be displayed here. For example, IPA client 1 is the host that I just added. Host groups can be created so that policies could be assigned to those groups. Net groups can be created. Here are the services which are present. You can add some more custom services. Here are the DNS entries, you can add it. Here is the policy that you want to implement: host based, who should be allowed to access which host; host based, which services on which hosts. So we'll have a separate session for it. IPA server, role based access control, self service, what can he himself do. So okay, to test out this lab, let's create a new user. And do we have a user? It's not there. So RCVal user is not there. I'm going to create it on this IPA server. User login is RCVal, first name is Rajneesh, last name is Sival. New password, and I just click on add. If you want to add other user, you can just click on the second tab, this one. I just click on add. So now this user is created, and if you see the details of this user belongs to the group IPA user, which is the default group to which any user that is created will belong to. Now if I am trying to get the database password and get the details of the user RCVAL, it exists. This is for the IPA server, and the same happens at the client end. Let me try to log in. So here, as soon as you log in into it, it says your password is expired, please change it. This is my current password that was provided by the administrator. Okay, let me create a new one as rcval at 123. rcval at 123. So the password was changed. Okay, I am able to log in into this machine. In case you want the home directories to be automatically created on it, we can modify. There is a module, PAM module, PAM underscore MK home dir, that can be used. I'm looking for how SSHD authentication works. It make use of password auth, pam.d password auth, and I just add this as the last line, which says whenever a session is created, make sure that the home directory is present. Check the details from etc.scal. If not present, create it. For group and others, no access is there. And now if I try to log in again into the same client, it will create home directory for me. So the shell that was provided to me is bin sh instead of bin bash. We can change them. Coming on to user rcval, having a look into properties, we can add the other details like address, employee number, car license, manager, and most importantly, the objective is to change the shell to bin bash. Update it. I think it's updated. Let's re-log in. No, not yet updated. Clicking on users rcval, having a look into the login shell, it works fine. Duplicate rcval at 123. So here you can see that you have the bash shell now. Sorry, dollar shell. So, and here you can see the details: get ent, password, rcval. In the same way, you can create multiple groups and allow access to them. Hoping that I am able to make it clear to you. The most important thing that you need to make sure about the IPA server is make sure that the ports are open before you get it set up, because as soon as IPA server install will run, After the server has been configured, it will try to make itself a client. It should be able to connect to the Kerberos server. It should be able to connect to the DNS server for the resolution. So it's best in case you have the firewall rules in the place before you start it. Second very important instruction is, let's install a fresh server before you install IPA on it, because it has a set of utilities which needs to be installed and configured by the IPA. For example, in case you have configured the name server, it could be difficult for you, or it could be difficult to get it managed through IPA. So the suggestion is, the best approach is to install everything on IPA and install them after you have installed the base packages on it. Don't install GUI. So I think we are done and all looks fine. SSH IPA dot labs dot local. Okay, here we have logged in using a user rcval. One thing I wanted to show you is, here we see that we have a ticket granting ticket for it. It simply means that we are using Kerberized authentication. If I do SSH IPA dot labs dot local, I am able to log in into the server without entering the password. The reason being, I already have a ticket granting ticket for the complete infrastructure, so I am not required to provide the password again and again in case I want to access a different service. That's the beauty of the thing. This provides single sign-on. So in case we have hundreds of PCs in our infrastructure, we can log in into any other server. Definitely, in case the IPA policy is allowing me for that, we can log in into the other infrastructure servers without providing the passwords again and again. So this is what is known as single sign on. So okay, for the client end, let's confirm one more thing. After the reboot, the authentication must work fine. IPA client, I am just rebooting it. Open console, let it reboot. So we rebooted IPA server also. The service was switched on by itself. Okay, it's booting now. So here you can see that even after the reboots of IPA server or IPA client, I am able to log in into these machines. So this is what is the generic details of how IPA server and IPA clients work. We'll have a different session configuring Ubuntu server on it. Thanks for viewing the video. Have a good day.